As far as a theistic critique of atheism goes, one of my biggest concerns, and when I talk to my friends who don't believe in the supernatural, they only believe in a physical material world, is I talk to them about them living in a one-dimensional world. And this would also apply to pantheists. Remember, we talked about naturalism, materialism, being monistic. And what I mean by that is they only believe in one underlying reality, and that is a physical, material substance. For the pantheist, with all the different flavors and layers stripped away, for them the one underlying substance is the spiritual, which would also make them one-dimensional. A world only of spirit, where the physical world is Maya or illusion, that would be like the pantheistic piece. And for atheism, we only have a physical material world with nothing spiritual or supernatural beyond the physical material. And so here we have these two monistic systems, and this is where I talked about theism being dualistic, where theists believe in both a real physical material world, universe, human bodies, but they also believe there's a spiritual aspect that permeates all things. We are not just a body, we are a soul that has a physical material vehicle in which we indwell. For the pantheist, they have a spirit, but the whole world is spirit. And what we perceive as physical material is really just illusion. The ultimate spiritual reality is there is only one thing, that one thing is God, and we are all a part of God. Materialists will say, you can't just posit these things that we can't physically experience. I mean, how are we supposed to verify that? And for the pantheist, they would see dualism as a problem because now you're diminishing God if you add anything to God. And we talked about that, where I drew the circle and we started saying, is the tree God? Is the coffee mug God? Is Betty God? And when we started putting these things outside of the circle of God, after a while we realize we end up having a God that looks like Swiss cheese, and the more things you list that are not God, all of a sudden we've listed everything in the cosmos, and now God does not exist. And so that becomes an interesting argumentum ad absurdum from a pantheistic perspective, showing what happens when you disidentify God from his creation. The reason I like the panentheistic position so much is it allows for us all being in God and God being in all things without all things becoming God. And I drew that chart for you, showing you the difference between classic theism, pantheism, naturalism, and panentheism. One of my personal concerns with pantheism, even though they believe in God, the God of many pantheists seems to me much more like the Force in Star Wars. In fact, George Lucas used a lot of Eastern philosophy and religion in writing that series. And so we have this tension, right? This yin-yang between the good and evil, the light and the darkness. And the Force, it's trying to keep this sort of balance. But it's not really personal, right? You don't pray to the Force. It's not something you have a relationship with. It's simply a power or an energy you can tap into and use or be affected by. I was talking to this one Hindu woman I met on an airplane flying home from some trip, and I asked her, it was interesting, we were both actually reading the same book, and so we had a good discussion about it. And I asked her, because one of my biggest critiques is, I said, but can you know God personally? Because as a Christian, I have a personal God, I have a relationship, and can you know God personally? And she just gave me a Buddha smile, and she said, I can know God as well as I can know myself, which I thought was a fantastic pantheistic answer, because in the end, she's acknowledging that she herself is God, or at least a part of the divine. But what a weight, right? If I had that degree of deity where I was the end-all be-all of all things, not only am I responsible for my own actions and choices and well-being and happiness, but for that of all things, of the whole cosmos. And that's quite a burden to bear. Any other questions or comments? We talked about the problem of evil. We talked about, a little bit more on the problem of evil. I was kind of all over the road, but I was talking about ways we define evil, and how I said I wouldn't really categorize things like tsunamis and earthquakes, floods as evil, even though from a human perspective we could certainly see them that way, and they can bring a lot of death and destruction. But I also use the example of physical pain, where we often think about, oh, I burned myself, or I broke my foot or my finger, and just become so aware of that excruciating pain that will contort our whole body to protect that wounded or burned or damaged member. But in this sense, we could actually see pain as a good, right? Where it's letting the body know, hey, get your hand off the hot coil, or get away from the fire, or don't pick up that kind of snake, or we learn certain things will cause us damage. And one of the quickest things, I mean, think about how much quicker your nerves are than your thought process, where you'll have pulled your hand away from something that's causing it duress before you even have time to rationally think about it. So in that sense, and even long-term pain that's telling you, hey, this member, this broken part of you is not healed yet, so you need to take extra care of it. And so in that sense, pain could actually be seen as a good thing. Where I would certainly entertain this problem of pain being evil is people suffering from chronic pain. Yeah, they know they're sick, they know they're damaged, they know they're broken, but the pain just keeps going and going, and there's nothing they can do about it. And I don't know if you've ever met anyone that lives in chronic pain, but it's really hard. I mean, think about when you're not feeling well, how hard it is to be pleasant and civil and patient when the vehicle you're traveling in, unlike a car where you get out of it and it no longer affects you if it's got a dented fender or a leaking radiator, our bodies, we don't get to just pop out and disassociate ourselves with the pain. It's a much more intimate relationship we have with our physical bodies than we do with our other vehicles. One more angle, and this was part of that debate or discussion I posted up for you about atheism and theism. Part of what the theist was trying to get across was you cannot have absolute truth without a God. And I don't think he explained, at least I didn't think the explanation was very good, but basically the premise is you need a God to get everything rolling before you can have anything else, including truth or objective knowledge. You've heard me talk about knowledge, and I'm a little bit more agnostic when it comes to capital K knowing things. I told you I only know, capital K know, like 3 things, and even those I think are up for some debate. But this idea that without God all truth becomes relative, I can see the point of that. Because whether it's science, religion, philosophy, they're all going to approach things from a different perspective. They'll have different interests. They're trying to find out different things. And for some things, science simply can't be used, like abstract concepts and principles, like love, unless you want to boil down love to a chemical reaction, or religion, religious devotion, or those transcendental feelings. Once again, a scientific materialist would just have to find the location in the brain where those events are taking place and explain it in some biochemical way.